Alright, so we're going to move on to something a little bit different. We're going to use the topology brush to give us some base topology to create those yellow tubes you see on the side there. And the way you use this is you drag out a curve for one side of your shape, then drag out a parallel curve for the other side of your shape, and then go ahead and just cut through lines, and once you have a closed off circuit, I guess, you'll start seeing the faces coming through. And then once you're happy with your shape, I like to bring my brush size down to 1, click on it, and then split hidden. And what that'll do is it'll give you a flat, one-sided shape and a separate subtool. And then of course we're gonna fill in that color. And then let's go ahead and make sure that our little strip of topology matches the concept. And this will be easier to do now that we only have a strip of topology and not an extruded piece. And now that we're happy with that top strip, we're going to go ahead and lay out the second tube using that same method. And this topology doesn't have to be perfect. It really is just a basic strip of topology. As you can see here, the first one didn't quite work for me, but it's okay because I can just I can pull it out and add that edge loop in after. And once again, we'll split hidden, and that'll give us that second strip of tube. Here I noticed that I needed a little bit more topology, so I just went ahead and grabbed that last edge on the side there, and extruded it out because it looks like the tube is wrapping inside of the chest. It seems to be like a holding place for these fireflies, but it's also like an open ecosystem where these fireflies can come and go as they please, but it's also the thing that runs this robot. And so here we're going to go ahead and extrude these two pipes and start pushing them to place and inflating them and making sure that they feel right and they sit outside of the chest piece. In this situation, I just deleted the caps because it gives me a really nice clean cutoff, and also because I know that those tubes are going to be sitting inside another piece of topology and you'll never see the ends of those tubes. And here we're just duplicating that bottom tube because it is so similar. And with that bottom tube maxed off now, I can edit it freely without worrying about messing up the tube that is above it. Alright, so we have all three of the tubes basically blocked in. Just enough now so that I can move on to the rest, but I'll be coming back and I'll be doing small edits here and there as I notice things that are off or need fixing. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some of the gears that are sitting in the center piece, specifically the little cylinder and then what looks like two beetle prongs, or I don't know if that was maybe on purpose, but that initial part is going to be pretty simple because it really is just a cylinder. I think what's going to be important is making sure that it's the right size and that it works and looks good. So let's get that going. Okay, so I think we have that cylinder just about right. So let's try working on these prongs. And to me, they really just look like a cylinder that's been like sliced and separated. So I just went ahead and duplicated the cylinder that I had, and then I grabbed the one that had the history and then went back in history till it was just a basic cylinder again because it's essentially in the right place and just easy to use. So here I am beveling the middle edge loop. What that's doing is helping me find kind of like a center point to cut this up. If you look at the two prongs and kind of connect them, you'll see that this is essentially what it is. It's a cylinder that's been stretched along the middle. And I went ahead and inset the faces so that it would give me that kind of that outer shape and then now all I have to do is adjust this, get it to look right, and then we can delete the center. Okay, so we now have kind of like the basic plane of what I think it should look like. So we're just going to push it into place, delete that topology, and then cut open the front parts so we do have those separate parts there. And now that we have this basic shape here, we can go ahead and extrude. We're going to flip our normals because they got flipped when we extruded. So this piece has a pretty interesting shape in that the center kind of looks like it bends in. So what I have to do is add an edge loop in the middle and then find a way to mask off this part here. And so that's what we did. We masked off that middle edge loop and extruded along the y-axis. And then what we have to do is kind of I noticed that when I did that, it pulled the ends, and that's kind of the only part we don't want to be extruded, so we just do that one more time. And with a little bit of pushing and pulling, I slid down the top edge loop and the bottom one, and now we're just going to add in our support edge loops, and we have our whatever piece this is, whatever you want to call it, the beetle prongs. So let's move on to the next one. If you're looking inside of the collar that we have there, there's kind of this like black disc that has these extruded parts. And so this is a situation where you kind of need to pre-plan what you're doing. You want to count how many there are there. And it looked like to me that 12 or 10 would be a good number to work with. And it seemed like that was the amount of number of kind of like divisions in the pie, if you would, that I saw there in the concept. Now we really only need this top part, and so it's much easier to work with it if we just kind of delete the rest of the cylinder, and then afterwards we can extrude it back down. This part's going to get a little more interesting, so we're going to insert an edge loop, and the reason why we're doing that is because we want to separate this inner part from the outer part, and we just want that ring. And we're going to activate Symmetry in Y and turn on Radial Symmetry. And make sure that we have the right number of radials to match what we have. So as you can see, it works for me. Whenever I press bevel, it hits because I have 10. And then I went ahead and extruded, make sure to flip our faces. And then now, because of the bevel that we did, we have those polygroups to work with. We're going to go back and turn Radial off and start moving it into place. Alright, so now that we have it somewhat in place, this shape dips in, and so what we're going to have to do is mask out this middle part and pull it down. Mask, reverse, and then just use the gizmo to pull down. Our initial collar was not far down enough, so we just have to move flat island. And we should be good to go on that side of things. And once we're happy with the shape, I went ahead and split that center piece off. I'm going to grab the right colors just because it helps me make sure that I'm matching things correctly. Make sure you don't have a mask on your object when you're filling it with color. So we're going to be working on that middle piece here really quickly. Super simple. It's just like a yellow disc. Putting in the edge loops that we need. And then now, since we're happy with our shape, we'll go ahead and extrude in those bevels that we made initially from the beginning. And put in our support lines. And now last thing we'll do is, it looks to me like there's some kind of bevel on the little center yellow sphere here. So what we can do is we can polygroup this center and then extrude it down. And then once we make sure that those lines are fortified and it looks the way we want it to when we smooth down, we'll be done with this piece too. So next up we have the ball joint that goes that connects the arm to the chest. We're going to do something a little different here. We're going to bring in this polysphere, and in the initialize options we can decide how many edge loops we want vertically and horizontally. It doesn't really matter per se. I just kind of want something that's a lot less than what I had there, because that was just like, that would be impossible to work with. So from there we make polymesh 3D, we append it back in, and now it's time to put it into place and line it up with the concept. Okay, so I'm happy with the placement. So we're going to go ahead and add an edge loop, because it looks like this is, there is the joint, and the joint is sitting inside of another sphere, and it rotates inside of that. So once I polygroup that island, we'll extrude it in, and then add the edge loops to make sure it looks good when we smooth. Once we're happy with that, we'll extrude the cylinder. And it's a little flayed out here, so we'll mask off the top, alt-click the middle vert, and then scale it in so it's a nice cylinder. And you can see that part sticking through the chest, but we can just delete the extra parts that are sticking out. It's more important that it matches the concept than it actually works, because this is art. We're not actually making a real working robot. And then because this part here, the cap is not going to be seen, I'm just going to delete it. It'll make it more clean and less topology. So let's go ahead and tackle that center gear. This is going to be a piece that has evenly divided ridges, and so it's going to take a little bit of trial and error to find out exactly how much topology you need. In this situation, I found that a cylinder with 8 sides is a great place to start. And so once we make that, we'll go ahead and append it back into our scene. And once we have it placed and sized correctly, we'll add in our details. Now that we're happy with the block in, we need to get rid of these poles, because if we add edge loops in now, they'll loop around in weird ways and mess up the topology. So if we inset these side faces and delete these inner polygroups, then we won't have to worry about the looping. I'd like to add more topology to this, but I don't want to lose the sharpness. So if we crease the sides and then divide, we'll get more topology, but still keeping the same shape. And now we have the perfect even amount of topology to add these ridges, and the best way to do that is to turn on radial symmetry. And with radial symmetry turned on and QMesh selected, we can alt, left click, and select our faces, and with QMesh pull them out. And we do have some residual creases going on from the extrusions, so we'll go ahead and get rid of the creases and then add in our own edge loops so that we can bring back some of that sharpness. Turn off radial symmetry. And that should about do it. We have our gear. Now that we have the gear in place and I'm looking back at the centerpiece, I think it would look a lot better if instead of an enclosed shape we just had a shell that covered all the gears that are inside. I think it would look a lot more realistic. So what we'll do is we'll use QMesh, Alt Select, and grab the top and bottom of the shape, delete it, and then we'll bridge the top and the bottom. Normally what you would do in a situation like this is you could just delete the tops and the bottoms and then extrude the shell, and it would give you the thickness, but this shape is a little more complicated than that. But even though it is a little more complicated, we can still do this very quickly and easily. Now that I have those two polygroups deleted, what you can't really see unless you count is that the top hole and the bottom one have the exact same amount of edges, and because of that I can very easily just grab the top and the bottom and bridge close holes. Make sure you have 2 holes selected when you bridge, and there we go. Very easy, very clean. Make sure you fill in that color again. And now we have the cover for these gears that kind of gives us a much more realistic version of what this piece might look like. Okay, let's go ahead and jump back into those yellow tubes where the fireflies kind of go through, I guess. What we're doing now is we'll be creating the end parts, the caps to the tube, so essentially the in-between point of the chest and the tube. And then also what I would assume would be kind of the same connector points from the tube to the backpack. So let's go ahead and make that basic shape. So I essentially just created that poly loop and deleted everything else, making it as simple as possible. And then I'm going to extrude this out and it'll give me the shape that I want. I could just place this kind of cylinder wherever I wanted to, but instead I'm going to make this into an insert mesh so I can kind of freely place it whenever I want instead of having to resize it and do all that stuff. And the way you do that is you go into your brushes, create insert mesh, hide the original tool, and then you should just be able to drag it onto the surface you want. It will view any visible surface, so you kind of want to hide everything else around except for what's there. I'm only going to be placing this 3 or 4 times, so it's not too necessary, but it is kind of a neat trick to learn, and it can be very useful in other projects. Okay, now we have all 3 or 4 of these cylinders placed, and I think we can move on to the next part now.